Good evening and welcome to iScreemZ. My guest today is a lady who is a legend in the truest sense of the word, an award-winning actor with a resume of screen and stage credits that reads like a greatest hits list. She's the author of several books, and her latest, which is a collaboration with authors Tom Moore and Ken Weissman, Grease, Tell Me More, Tell Me More, Stories from the Broadway Phenomenon That Started It All, is released in June. Beloved by comedy fans for her role as Carol Trainer on the sitcom Maude, and by legions of sci-fi and horror fans across the globe, it is my great pleasure to welcome Adrienne Barbeau to the show. Adrienne, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, and I'm even better after that wonderful introduction. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And you know what? Why don't we start with your book? Because that brings us beautifully, to the beginning of your career on stage there. So tell me more, Grease, tell me more, stories from the Broadway phenomenon that started it all. What can you tell us about this upcoming release?
Well, it is a collection of stories and memories and photographs from over 100 actors and musicians and crew members who were all involved with the original Broadway show, and then the national companies that went out, right after we opened off Broadway. Some of them are incredibly funny. Some of them are very touching. From names you will recognize: John Travolta, Mary Lou Henner, Barry Bostwick, myself. We have Patrick Swayze played Zuko at one point. We have some stories about Patrick, and other names of people who have gone on to have careers in other fields or are still working. Walter Bobby, Broadway director, and Jerry Zaks, another Broadway director. And it came about because at the beginning of the pandemic, the original Broadway cast had a little Zoom reunion. And I thought, oh God, I'm gonna make it about 45 minutes, because I don't like Zoom and all of that. But 4.5 hours later, we were still talking and still telling stories, and most of them stories I had never heard. Audition stories from Alan Paul of Manhattan Transfer, and I mean, just wonderful stories about being on the road, and I hadn't heard most of them because I left the show fairly early on.
Okay. But
we hung up, and the next day I was taking a bath, and I thought, these stories would make a fantastic book. There's just, it's really a compendium of putting a show together, finding it, because the original Grease opened in Chicago at in a trolley car barn. And it was very, very raunchy. And then Ken Weissman, who was one of the collaborators on the book, saw the show and thought that he could bring it to Broadway. So it starts right from the beginning with stories from Jim Jacobs about how they even thought of the show, how it came to be, and goes through all of us auditioning, and then opening night and the bad reviews, and
bad reviews.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Opening night at Sardi's was a real downer.
Oh my goodness.
But there's an interesting article in this month's Forbes magazine about what the producers did to keep the box office open until word of mouth could get going, and that's also in the book. So I put out an email to everybody who had been at the Zoom meeting and said, what do you guys think about this? We could write this book. Since there's so many of us, we can donate any money to the Actors Fund, and And I got a call from Tom Moore, who directed the original Broadway show. And he said, you know, I wish you hadn't sent that email because I've had this idea for years and this is how it should be. And I said, fine, write it. He said, no, I can't do it by myself. Let's do it together. And so we brought Ken Waisman in, who had a fantastic memory for everything that ever happened, and also had, you know, so many. We have 250 photographs that very few people have ever seen, I think. And we got an agent. My agent submitted it, and we got a publisher, and the book is coming out June 7th. It's available already on Amazon for pre-order.
Incredible. And I'm going to want to read that myself because I love Grease. I'm a huge fan. And, you know, I got to ask, you know, playing, because obviously you, for anyone that's listening that maybe isn't aware, you were the very first Rizzo, you know, when the show opened.
Yes.
Did you imagine back then when you were sort of performing this, did you imagine what a massive phenomenon that it was going to become, what you were a part of?
No, of course. No. I mean, as I said, opening night, you know, the producers, financial people were telling them they better post a closing notice because the reviews,
that's
you know,
crazy.
they didn't get it. The New York critics didn't get it. One of them got it. And then the second string reviews, you know, started coming in, but the audiences loved it. But no, you know, it's not unlike when people ask me about the films that I did in the 80s, The Fog or Escape or Creepshow or Swamp Thing. Did you ever think that 50 years later, you know, those movies, this musical would be this phenomenon? No, we didn't. We were just, we just showed up and did the work and hoped that it would, you know, find its audience, and it did.
And history shows that it sure did, right? I mean, it's incredible. Now, at the same time, you were kind of, because obviously you did Fiddler on the Roof as well, right? Was one of your, right?
Yeah.
So while you were sort of, you know, you were in New York and you're having this wonderful stage career, you're thriving as a star. Your star starting to climb on television as well. You know, most notably, you were alongside B. Arthur and obviously in the hit sitcom Maude. As a young actor, did you kind of look towards Bea as somewhat of a mentor?
You know, I think it was more by osmosis. I mean, if my mentor in the show was Conrad Bain. Connie was like, I mean, when I bought my first house, and then I went and saw it after because I walked in and I looked at it and I made an offer right away, and then I never saw it again until escrow closed. And then I walked in and I looked at it and I thought, oh my gosh, have I made a terrible mistake? And I immediately called Conrad and I said, could you come look at this house and tell me if I've made a terrible mistake? So Conrad was sort of my mentor in life. I learned so much from working with Bea without even realizing I was learning it at the time. It wasn't like I was watching her and thinking, okay, this is the way to be, you know?
Yeah.
It was just the way she was. And I had never done television. I'd never done film. I'd only done stage. But Bea came from a theatrical background. You know, she was the original Yenta in Fiddler. Although we never worked together. She had left long before I joined the show. But, and all of us came from a theatrical background. And so we all approached Maude like a stage play and brought that sense of professionalism and the desire to rehearse and the ability to learn lines, you know, in between shows, because we rehearsed for 4.5 days. And then they brought an audience in and we did it straight through, just like a play. And then on our dinner break, the writers went back and changed what wasn't working and rewrote this line and changed that joke and everything. And Bea was the first one to have it all just word perfect for the second show that night. So I just learned how to be in a room with me. And then of course timing. I mean, you can't work with someone who is so brilliant at comedy timing and not have it rub off on you. And to this day, sometimes I'll deliver a line and I'll think, oh my gosh, that's exactly what B would have done, you know.
Right, yeah. What would you say of those things that you obviously, you know, as you say, you're just learning as you kind of go, like all of us, right? From those lessons, what would you say was not necessarily the most difficult lesson, but what would you say was the most sort of challenging thing that you encountered in those sort of early years on stage and on television?
An enormous sense of insecurity of
Right.
I mean, even you know, I got to New York. I had been sort of a big fish in a little pond,
Okay.
doing theater and everything. And I got to New York, and actually, it was a very specific thing that sort of started my problems. Is I started studying voice with a teacher who told me my voice had been damaged and that there was a problem with my voice. And when you hear that twice a week for a year and a half, suddenly you don't think you can sing. And I mean, I was on Broadway singing. I played the second daughter in Fiddler, the one that sings the song at this train station.
Yeah.
And you know, I remember one night someone came backstage to see one of the other actors, but as I was leaving, he said, "Your song was beautiful. It was just beautiful." And I thought, why is he saying that? He doesn't know me. Why would he doesn't have to say that. And it was sort of like I had to finally come around to an understanding that I hadn't been hired because they felt sorry for me. You know,
Really?
maybe
Right.
I had been hired because they thought I could do it. And then the same thing happened when I went into Maud. I felt like I was, you know, I was younger than everybody else, but I certainly had no experience with television, and they're all more talented than I am, and they're all funnier than I am. And you know, I had to work to find my sense of self and not have it undermine me.
Right. Right.
Even when I, you know, going in for an audition, if you you know, if you go in and you're incredibly nervous because you don't think you can do it, that affects your audition. So that was certainly one thing.
And you know, it's kind of funny, but not funny in a humorous way, but it's strange to hear you say that somebody was critiquing your voice, you know, when your voice is such a wonderful attribute of who you are. I mean, you've gone on, you were Catwoman in the animated Batman because you have such a wonderful voice, right? It's funny, and I guess it kind of probably gives you a chuckle to look back now to say, like, well, you know, look how far I went, you know, kind of thing. But that's great. It's amazing to hear that. And obviously, you know, so you went on in you had a great career in TV. You know, you went on, you did Someone's Watching Me and all these great movies, and then you sort of transitioned. The Fog, I believe, was your first transition to a theatrical feature. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. And it was, you know, in 1978, 79, when John Carpenter cast me in The Fog. In those days, if you were on a television series, you couldn't get seen for a movie. The producers felt that you know, no one would pay money in a theater to see somebody they could see for free every Tuesday night on CBS.
Right, and bizarre.
Had it not been for John offering me the part of Stevie Wayne, probably sort of writing it for me, But who knows how long it would have been? I don't know. I mean, I even had a hard time when I first got to LA and was doing Maud, getting an audition for a straight TV series. I finally got hired to do a Quincy, where I played a rape crisis counselor who had been raped.
Okay.
And suddenly it was like, oh, okay, she's not a sitcom. I mean, she's not a musical comedy actress only. She's not a comedian only. She can do drama too. And then it was, oh, she's not just stage and she's not just television. She can do movies too. But there is a real need to pigeonhole, you know, in those days especially.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny when we look at it now, because the doors really, it's completely different. People transition from TV to film and back and forth nowadays, right? We see a real difference now, so it's interesting. I got
now they transition from Instagram, you know.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I gotta tell you, you know, The Fog in particular is a personal favorite from me. I feel a great connection to the character of Stevie Wayne because I personally was a full-time single parent for many years. So, you know, yeah, so there's a kind of, outside of it being a great ghost story, I really appreciate and admire your character in that. Was the performance as physically and emotionally demanding as it appears on screen?
You know, I don't, it was not emotionally demanding for me because I just was able to tap into that very easily. I didn't have to work for it, you know. I mean, the thought of losing my child or
right.
that part wasn't. Was it physically demanding? It was difficult going up and down the stairs to the lighthouse, especially when it was windy, because if the wind got too bad, the lighthouse is part of the Point Reyes National Seashore, and it's run by the you know, the National Parks Department, I guess. And they would shut it down if it got too windy, and so we wouldn't be able to film. The only thing that was challenging, not difficult, is the last scene on the lighthouse. I had to act the entire scene in reverse. I had to act the emotions from the end of the scene when the ghost has disappeared and I'm relieved because I haven't just been killed.
Okay.
From there to being terrified by the ghost, down to being threatened by the ghost, because in 1978, 79, they certainly didn't have CGI, and they didn't have any way to evacuate the fog from the room. They could only blow the fog into the room. And if you watch the scene, you know, the fog is in the room. It comes in with the ghosts. Yeah. And then when the ghost disappears, the fog disappears. Well, they couldn't do it like that. So I had to act it backwards. I had to be very careful not to blink quickly, because John said when they develop the negative, you know, evidently they turn it over or they do something. I've never understood what they do. But he said, you know, if you blink, it's going to look weird. So that was the only thing that was a little challenging.
I read a few times that there were discussions about a sequel. Now, obviously that didn't come to fruition, but if it had, would you have liked to reprise the role of Stevie Wayne? Is that something you would have liked to?
Yes, definitely. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Were there any serious, like, did you ever engage in any serious talks about that? Did it ever seem close to happening?
No, in fact, I've never. You're mentioning that is the first time I've ever heard them talking about a sequel to The Fog. They did make a remake, which I didn't see, but no, I don't remember any discussions. They've talked about Escape many times, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
but no, I don't remember. That would be interesting.
Well, I'm going to say you're the person that brought up the remake, not me. So let's just cursorily cast that to one side, because it was not a fan in any way, shape, or form. But you mentioned Escape from New York, and there you rate Maggie. Let's talk about Maggie for a second. You know, there's this enduring fascination with these kind of stoic lone wolf type characters. You know, and while Kurt Russell's Snake Plissken is obviously the center of the story in Escape from New York, your character Maggie, to me, it feels very much like a feminine sort of mirror image. You know, she's cunning, she's got the same survival instincts, the same kind of you don't want to cross me type of persona. You know, she comes across like a real potential power player in that movie. I always wanted to know more about her. I'm curious, did you ever create any kind of did you create like a backstory for her in your mind as to who she is?
I did, but I couldn't tell you what it was now. I mean, but at the time, because I do, that's the way I approach every role is, you know, I get an understanding of what their life was like before, what brought her to the island, you know, what crime had she committed, how did she meet Brain. I mean, nobody else ever needs to know it, and of course I couldn't tell you it now at all, but
for sure,
I did
you know, and it's funny because the reason I talk about in the mirror, because there's that moment where you and Snake are kind of facing each other, and I think he says, what do you want? And he's like, I want to meet the Duke. And there's real sparks between you guys for a second there. And it just feels like, man, these guys could have their own movie. I'd like to see a spin-off here, right? But is there a specific kind of favorite moment? Because I mean, obviously, Escape from New York, it's so beloved. You know, is there a favorite moment of yours or a specific vivid memory that kind of comes to mind when you think of Escape from New York?
Well, my favorite moment on screen is when Maggie reaches out her hand to insist that Snake throw her the gun so that she can avenge Brain's death. But my favorite moments while we were doing the film all involved Donald Pleasance, who made me laugh like nobody else has ever made me laugh.
Really?
Oh my God, he just had that British dry delivery, which he would save until right before we were going to start rolling. And then he'd say something and I would be collapsing in laughter. And I'd have to say to John, you know, please wait, you gotta wait because I can't do this scene yet. It just made me laugh.
Really? Oh my goodness, that's wonderful to hear that. I love Donald Pleasance there. You know, it's fantastic. And you know, you've been in, like I said at the beginning here when I kind of introduced you, like your resume, it really is. It's like a greatest hits. Like you've been in so many, but specifically that point in time, you know, you kind of had that real trifecta where you know, The Fog, Escape from New York, and then Creepshow, you know, which kind of reunited you with Hal Holbrook.
Right.
And your performance as Wilma or Billy in that is completely unforgettable. Tell us a bit about how you joined that movie.
Well, actually, my agents, I guess, sent me the screenplay, and I read it, and I thought, there's no way I can't do this. This is gross, and it's bloody, and it's terrible. This is terrible. And I didn't know anything about George Romero, but John Carpenter was saying to me, you can't turn down an opportunity to work with George Romero. I don't know. I don't know. But Tom Atkins is a very close friend and was at that time. And Tom had already been cast in the film. And so I called Tommy and I said, Tommy, you're doing this movie? I mean, this is really good. And he said, oh, you don't get it at all. It's going to be a comic book. It's going to be very stylized. It's going to be very funny. You've got to do it. So I did it, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, you know, you talk about how funny Donald Pleasance was when you guys were working together there. And, you know, it looks to the viewer, to me, it looks like you're just having a blast in Creepshow. Is that the case? Was that the case with the set?
Oh yes, I had a great time. I fell in love with George the day I met him, and just totally put my trust in him because the character is so out there, and that's not the way I was used to working. Plus, I don't drink. I had never been drunk in my life, and I, it was like I hope this seems like I know what I'm doing, but I had a great time. I had a great time. The two fellas were fantastic. Fritz Weaver, both of them. Just and it was Pittsburgh, which I love, and
Yeah.
so it was a joy to do that movie. I didn't want to visit the set when they were doing the E.G. Marshall segment.
Oh my goodness, with the bugs.
Oh God.
Yeah,
I was far away.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's nightmarish. It was honestly, and again, kind of coming. I try not to be the fan, but like I can't help it because I am a fan. And it was a wonderful treat to see you return sort of to Creepshow in an episode of the recent TV show. Was that a nostalgic experience to kind of be back in that universe again?
I was really happy or pleased or honored or whatever that they asked me, and I didn't know anything about Greg Nicotero as a director,
Right.
And from the moment I stepped on the set, I mean, yeah, the character can't hold a candle to Billy, in the original.
Right.
But I was just happy to be invited. And the moment I stepped on the set and watched Greg do what he was doing, I thought, okay, this is another director I can trust completely, just like George. And it was a real nice experience. I had worked with, oh my gosh, Tobin. I had worked with Tobin before. We had done a Criminal Minds together, playing an incestuous brother and sister, and we had done another horror film together. I don't remember if I played his wife. I think I did. No, I don't remember. But so it was a pleasure to work with Tobin again, and I'd never worked with Giancarlo, and he was great. So it was a nice experience.
Yeah, and again, coming at it from the other side of the screen, it was fantastic. It was a real kind of it felt like a real love letter to the fans to see you back in that again. So that was great. Now obviously we've kind of talked about how you've been asked time and again and I asked you with Grease, did you realize that this was going to be so iconic at the time when you were in these movies, when you were in Greece, but when you go to sort of conventions like the Frightmare in the Falls and Comic-Con and these type of things, and you get that chance to interact with the fans, and they tell you what these roles in these films have meant to them. Does it ever surprise you, like the level of endurance that these have kind of, the parents are getting their kids to watch them and it's just coming from one generation to the next? Does that ever surprise you?
I mean, I don't know if it surprises me anymore now because I've done, I do 2 or 3 of these conventions a year, but over the years, as I've seen it grow, and yes, it still does because some people will come. I mean, when the man comes up and he's got a picture, an entire scene from one of the films that you've done, tattooed on his arm on the back of his leg,
right?
Or, and then when the 16-year-olds come up and say, my dad just showed that movie to me last week and I love it. It's my favorite movie. And I've had people come up. Well, it does still surprise me because was not raised going to the movies.
Okay.
And I am not a person who's ever watched a movie more than once. I mean, there's maybe 2 movies I can think of,
Mm-hmm.
3 movies I can think of that I've watched more than once. And so when people come up and say, oh, I watch The Fog once a month, or we watch, Escape from, it does still surprise me, because I just, it's just, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful, it's gratifying, but it's also just, isn't that interesting? There's one man out there who has the fog on somehow. He has the fog set to play when he falls asleep every night, and he uses it to put himself to sleep, and then I guess it shuts off. I don't know if it's on his phone, but I remember him telling me it's his it's his meditation every night.
Wow, that's a different one. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that one was different.
So, obviously, you're always asked about, these kind of roles. You're always asked about those movies. But is there a specific role, from your career that you're especially proud of, that you think, you know what, I really wish somebody would ask me about that for a change? Like, do you have that one particular role that you're like, wow, that's one I'd love to talk about?
I'm very proud of the role that evolved, the snake dancer, Ruthie the snake dancer. I love the show. I love the character. I loved everything about it, and I'm very proud of my work in that. And then totally off the wall, has nothing to do with television or film, but in 2016, I did the national tour of Pippin, playing Pippin's grandmother and singing the song that she has to sing, hanging upside down from a trapeze 15 feet in the air with no net, and doing an entire trapeze act while I was singing the song. So not many people know about that unless they saw the show, but I am sort of proud of being able to do that at that age.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's pretty remarkable. And I mean, and we touched on it earlier. Outside of these, these great screen roles you've done a lot of amazing sort of voice work as well. And Catwoman immediately springs to mind, because there's such a huge, fan base for Batman out there. How did you become involved with sort of the animated Batman and become so recognized as Catwoman?
The Catwoman came to me through a 30-second audition. I got a call from my agent asking me to please come in. They wanted me to audition for Catwoman. I wasn't a Batman fan. I'd never seen, maybe I had seen, I don't think I'd ever seen Eartha Kitt. Maybe I had seen Lee Merriweather do it, but I never watched it on TV or anything. And I just went in, and they had 30 seconds worth of copy, and I read it. And about a month later, I got a call saying that they had cast me as Catwoman. Prior to that, and the only reason I know this is because I'm just putting together a reel. My voiceover agents asked me to put together a reel of my animation stuff and my video game stuff. And I'm finding all this stuff that I did. I did it was a Japanese anime movie that was converted to an English version called Ultraman back in, I don't know, 1980 something, which I had totally forgotten about. And I think that was one of the very first voiceovers I ever did. And then I did and then I did Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Right.
But Catwoman is the one that everyone knows, of course. I just played a French maid who has a makeout scene with Carl Reiner on Family Guy about a year and a half ago.
do you enjoy doing like it? Obviously, you're. It's very different, I would imagine, obviously from acting on screen. Do you really enjoy the voiceover work a lot?
I do. I do. In fact, I just did another movie, another animated film that I guess I can't talk about yet, but
Mhm.
it's a different, it requires a different set of chops,
Right, right.
to quote George Romero. But I really love it, in part because I don't have to put makeup on. I don't have to get dressed. and,
That's a,
and, uh, and I enjoy doing the video games too.
yeah, and you know what, I'm not a gamer. My sons are gamers. I gotta ask, how does that happen? How did you kind of become involved in sort of the video game market there?
Again, it's all most of us in LA have a theatrical agent who, is out looking for and receiving scripts and submitting you for roles as an actor. And then those of us who do voice work have a voiceover agency that's all they do is voiceovers, on camera commercials, which I don't do. And so all of these things have either come either as an offer. I think maybe Batman Arkham Asylum was one of the first video games I did. It may not be the first one, or Marvel Ultimate Universe or something, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes, I'll just get a call from the agency saying, they'd like you to do this role in such and such. I'm doing one next week and then sometimes we'll get an email with a script, and they'll say, they want to hear, you need to audition for this one. Mm-hmm. And I also do narrating for the blind for television series and movies. So I have a recording studio in my house. Okay. And so I can and since the pandemic, we used to go into our agent's office and record the audition in the office. Since the pandemic, I just go down to my studio and use GarageBand and send the audition in.
Wow. It's amazing to hear, because you've done so many things, and you're such a multifaceted, sort of actor there. I have to ask, in terms of stage and screen, where do you feel more at home, on stage or on screen?
Well, I probably feel more at home on stage, but I don't enjoy working at night. So I'd rather do film and television. What really makes me feel at home is the right role. That's why I take it, I accept what I'm offered if I like the words on the page and if I like the whole page.
Gotcha.
But
sorry,
probably because I started on stage, it comes pretty naturally.
Comes naturally, yeah. Is there a sort of, so you've played so many different characters in so many different roles. Is there, if you had a bucket list of kind of roles that you haven't done yet, is there a specific role that you'd really love to play?
I can't, other people have asked that, and I don't, I know it when I see it, but no, there's not anything, especially now at this point in my career. I always used to say, I would have loved to have played Jane Fonda's part in Clute, or Joanne Woodward's part in Three Faces of Eve.
Wow, yeah, right.
That's okay. long ago.
So what's on the horizon? You continue to be, you're just one of the hardest working women in show business. What's coming up? What's on the horizon for you, Adrienne?
I'm doing another interesting film, a short film this time, in another month or so. Combination thriller, supernatural, or thriller horror.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing that. I've got a couple of things in the can that haven't come out yet. I'm doing another video game in about 2 weeks, and just did a movie for a direct to video movie, animated movie, about 2 weeks ago. And the book, of course, is coming out. But in the interim, I almost every day am doing video captioning for the blind for various television series, movies. I do the narration of what is going on screen in between the dialogue of the actors. And so if you're watching your TV and you put the SAP channel on, the secondary audio programming channel on, you will hear my voice or another narrator's voice describing the action for people who are visually impaired. And I really love doing it. I get to see a lot of stuff I'd never watch otherwise. And, you know, it's fun.
See, you know, I'm going to be going downstairs to the TV tonight and switching that on. I'm going to be listening out for you now, right? So
well, you can look at if you're a television watcher, you can look at Bull or SEAL Team or SWAT, or I did the Tiger King, not this latest thing that they did, but the original Tiger King documentary. I've done a lot of features. You know, it just whatever comes. Oh, Firestarter. If you were in the movie, if you go to see the Firestarter of the movie, and I mean, I guess I've never done this. I've never gone into a movie theater and asked, but I guess they have headphones that you can use, and then you will hear. You'll hear my voice doing telling what's going on in the background.
You know what? I wasn't aware of that. That's it's funny. You've taught me something there, because I didn't even know. No, that's incredible. I gotta ask you this final question, because I always ask this of all of my guests, and it's my favorite. I love listening to this. Final question, Adrienne. You know, somewhere out there, you know, I do these interviews. I love these. They're very empowering. You know, and somewhere out there, you know, there's a young actor who's inspired by one of your performances, you know, or maybe more. And, you know, they're going to watch Escape from New York or The Fog or Swamp Thing or whatever. And they're going to think, you know what? Yeah, I want to do that. What is your unique advice to that young boy or girl out there that's possibly heading on those first steps towards show business?
Well, aside from the basics of practice your craft, whether that means finding a little, you know, community theater or you know, a friend's doing a video or whatever, that's separate. But I think the most important thing you can do is find out about yourself, whether that's through meditation or therapy, or the more you know about yourself, the more you will understand what you're bringing into a room, the more you will understand what your strengths are as an actor, the less you will undermine yourself when you are working. I don't know if that, I'm not explaining it very well, but
You're explaining it beautifully.
am I?
Yeah.
It's really important for you to know yourself. That's all. That, you know,
Yeah.
I have seen actors, you know, come into an audition and maybe something just happened outside, or they think they're better. They don't think they should even be having to audition, and they bring that in with them.
Mhm.
And that comes across the table, you know, and they undermine themselves that way. Um, so yeah, that's sort of a
Amazing.
general,
Amazing.
you know, yeah.
Adrienne, it has been an absolute joy and a pleasure. I will be forever a fan, and I thank you so much on behalf of our listeners for joining us this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much yourself, and I envy you being up in Canada. I really do.